Our first speaker is Erica Hunter. She's a supervisor with the Department for Children and Families, DCF, which is a state agency that provides a sort of safety net to care for children in need of care. She started out as an investigator right after earning her degree from KU, and for the last few years she's supervised the program. So I'm going to let her start talking to you and just tell you a bit about how it all works here. I'm going to ask you to please hold your questions. We have several speakers, and when both are done speaking, then we'll open the floor to questions for everybody. Okay.
Do you guys need me to have a mic, or can everybody hear me okay? We're good? Okay, because I'm not very good with holding onto a microphone right now. So again, my name is Erica Hunter, and I am the social work supervisor with the Lawrence Department for Children and Families, and I supervise the staff that go out on investigations of potential child abuse or neglect or non-abuse neglect cases that get called in. The child welfare system is huge, and it's probably, I'm not going to hit every point that you may even want to know about within the time span that I have. So I'm really going to go on the basics of what the job is so that you kind of just understand what DCF's role is with protecting children. So we get involved when somebody, it can be a citizen or what we call mandated reporters, call in a report to a 1-800 number and say, we have concerns about a child that has been abused or neglected. So that is how we get started, is by somebody calling in and saying they have concerns about a child. From there, we have somebody else that looks at the information that was called in, and they decide whether or not we should go out and talk to the family about what the concerns are. So what they say is DCF receives an average of 56,000 reports called in each year in the state of Kansas, and we probably only have about 50 to 60% of those get assigned each year. So all the reports that get called in, we don't necessarily go out and investigate. Once it is assigned for us to go out and investigate, the social workers will go out and they talk to what we call the alleged victim. So we talk to the child, we'll talk to their siblings, we talk to the parents, other caregivers, the person who allegedly did something. We'll talk to law enforcement if they were involved. We'll talk to doctors' offices, nurses, therapists, teachers, anybody that might have information about this child and the situation. If we need to ask questions, we're going to talk to them to see what all we can figure out. We work jointly with law enforcement frequently to do investigations, and we also work a lot with the court system in order to make sure we're protecting kids. So some of the things that we do, or we complete 2 assessments. One of the assessment is called a risk assessment, and another is called safety assessment. They kind of go together, but at the same time, they're looking at 2 totally different things. So the risk assessment, what we are looking at is what is going on with that child that potentially puts that kid in danger. So some of the things we might identify as risk when we're working with a family are substance abuse. Is there mental health issues with a parent? Are there low functioning, or is the functioning level of a parent a concern to us? Is there domestic violence? Do we have past abuse of a child that we are aware of? Are there severe behavior issues with a child? Lack of parenting skills? Homelessness, extreme stress on a parent. Has there been some situation that is making the parent very stressed out and they're unable to cope right now? Is there a past criminal history that we should be aware of? The living conditions that they live in, and also extreme financial difficulties and poverty. So those are kind of all the things that we start when we're working with a family, we ask about and get information. Most of the time, our families aren't just experiencing one of those. Most of the time, they're experiencing multiple issues all at the same time. So with all of that information, we then have to look at, let's say they have some mental health issues, some substance abuse, and there's past domestic violence in the home. We start looking and seeing, how is it that domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental health is affecting the children? Is it a parent that is smoking marijuana, has some depression, and is no longer in the relationship, but their children did not suffer any emotional trauma. They're getting to school every day. The parents are able to provide what they need. The parent has a job. They're really doing fine, but they may have what we call some risk factors. In that situation, we sit and say, that child may be safe because we don't have concerns that any of those things that were identified as risk are currently affecting that child. Another situation could be that we have a family who it's the use of methamphetamine. So the parent's using methamphetamine, they're homeless, and there's past domestic violence and mental health. So we'll go in and look at that and say, okay, how is this affecting the child? We might go into that situation and find the hotel that they're living in currently is in complete disarray. Paraphernalia is laying around, whether that's needles, the drug itself is laying around. The child, when we see them, could be a young child that appears to have not been bathed in a couple of days, very saggy diaper, just overall very concerns about the neglect and treatment that child is getting. So in those situations, we would be a lot more concerned and start evaluating what protective factors we can have that are going to help it. And that's when we kind of move into what safety do we have with this child. So we're going to look and see, do we have services we can put in place for this family? You know, are we able to get mom or dad into inpatient drug and alcohol treatment or outpatient drug and alcohol treatment? Do they have a relative that would be willing to have them go and live there, or just the children go and live there while they are trying to get things back on track? Do they have one of the parents willing to go do everything, but the other parent isn't? And so we can work with the one parent who's willing to change the situation. We often look to support systems. Most of the time that is family, but we do have sometimes friends or other people we look for. So it will be, is there grandma, aunt, uncle, somebody who is involved with the family that is willing to take care of those kids while the parents correct whatever our safety concerns are. So a lot of times before we even think about removing, we're talking to the parents about, hey, who else can take care of your kids? These are the concerns that we have. We want to see the kids be safe, but with people they know. So let's see who we can talk to that be willing and able to take care of them while you're unable to. We also want to take into consideration, you know, when we're looking at safety of kids, kind of the bond that kids have with their parents. You know, it may be a parent who's just really struggling with parenting, but we can tell that they're very nurturing. They have a good bond with their child. They're just needing some additional supports to learn how to parent a little bit better. But they do have the overall bond there that makes us know that they're going to try to do the best they can for their child. Let's see. So there's different kinds of action that DCF can take when we go out and look at situations. So a lot of times, you know, a lot of cases I would say we go and there's not any safety concern or high enough for DCF to take any sort of action. Every family functions differently, and so, you know, when we're meeting with them, we have to take into consideration this is a lifestyle, you know, this is generations of how they've lived. It's not neglectful, it's not abusive. So we're not going to sit and say that you need to change because it's a lifestyle issue. So there's a lot of cases that we don't make any recommendations or do anything with. If we go out and we think, you know, maybe this person just needs some mental health services, we could give them all the information we know on how to access some mental health services in the community. Or maybe it's a child that's under the age of 3 and they appear to be developmentally a little low, parents are struggling figuring out what to do. We can refer them on to like Tiny K services or somebody in town that works with young children. So we have to know all of the resources that are available in the community to be able to point parents in the direction to get those. Because really we want to see them reach out to somebody that's going to be a long-term person for them there. And that's usually somebody in the community that is able to do that. If we feel like there's nobody in the community that can meet the services that they need, or they already have some community services but just need additional support, DCF does offer some services to the families. So that would be, we can offer what's called family services. It is more just case management. So it's, because our cases with DCF, so when we get a report assigned and go out, our cases are only open for 30 days. They're not open long term. We're in and out. We go in, assess, see if somebody needs something, and then we're out. So we will make a referral for DCF services if we feel they need more. And we contract those services out. So the family services here in Douglas County, and I think in some of the other areas, what we call our Kansas City region, are through DECA, which also does a lot of the drug and alcohol stuff, but they do have our family service grant as well. So family services are case management. They'll go in and work with the family for about 6 months or more and just really get the family set up with stuff. So they'll make sure that say it's a family who struggles with parenting, mental health, transportation, and just in general, mom's kind of never quite getting the kids to appointments like she needs to. It's somebody that's kind of there as a guide for you, making sure, okay, we're going to get the kids to these appointments. We're going to set this up. Let's figure out how we can get the transportation going. Because a lot of times people just need a little bit of help, and then they slowly can figure it out on their own. So that's what family services is. Kids aren't really at risk of removal. Somebody just needs some additional help, so hopefully we're not continuing to get those reports. Then there's the family preservation services. Those are services that are for children that are at risk of coming out of the home. So that would mean that DCF during our assessment has gone through all of these risk and safety of a child and said that we feel without having this service, they would be at risk for coming out of the home. Family preservation is a year-long contract that DCF signs with that family, and they meet with someone for, it varies on what their needs are. A lot of times it's 2 times a week. The person will be meeting with the family preservation specialist, going over whatever it is that the family is needing, working on the goals with that family. And the whole point is to try to avoid that child from coming out of the home. And again, a lot of times we're not dealing with a family who just is homeless. A lot of times we're dealing with a family that is homeless. None of them have their high school education. They bounce around from jobs. There's mental health issues. They're low functioning. There was past domestic violence. And we just see kind of this pattern that over the years they've stayed in this way. And so we're not just dealing with, one issue most of the time. So we're kind of looking, and family will work with family preservation services, and a lot of times we see success with that. We see families get to a better point. We see them not needing our services. We may also see that a family just kind of plateaus. They may always just be a family that we see that needs more assistance, that needs more services, but it never quite means that their kids are at risk. They're just a family that needs more support and more services, and we'll always be there to offer it for them. If we feel that a child is not safe any longer in their home, that is when we would look to foster care. And again, those situations are when we feel that a child is in imminent risk, or that being in that home with whoever their caregiver is going to put them in a situation that is unsafe. So prior to ever deciding we want to remove a kid, there is so much stuff that happens because we know that removing the child is a huge event in that child's life. It can be something that is traumatic to that child, and it can be something that leaves a lasting impression. And so we want to make sure that it has been well thought through. We are not the only ones who make that decision. So if we even say that we want to remove a child, we have to send all of our information we know about the family to the district attorney's office. Then the district attorney's office is actually the one who reviews it. She decides if in our case, decides whether or not she's going to file it. She brings it to the judge, who then the judge ultimately signs it. So a lot of people think that DCF just is making these decisions to remove these kids, when really we just give the information to someone and someone else ultimately says yes or no. A lot of times, you get a good relationship with your district attorney, they're going to trust what you're saying, so we don't have problems with them denying us on things. Some places might, we don't. But it's really about if we are able to prove that that child is no longer safe in the home. So that was a really quick way to sum up what we do, and I probably missed a lot, but I know that you have Diane that needs to present too, so. All right.
I do have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Douglas County CASA, and I want to say first that I greatly respect the mission, the action, the education, and advocacy that you all exhibit through the League of Women Voters. I really respect the work that you do, and it's a great honor for me to speak with all of you today. This is actually the 25-year anniversary of our Douglas County CASA program, and our program was founded by Judge Jean Shepard in 1991. But the CASA program at large started in Seattle, Washington in 1976 by Judge David Sukup. And now there are almost 1,000 CASA programs nationwide, including some in the Philippines and in Canada. And here in Kansas, we have 23 CASA programs. And the very first CASA program in Kansas was in Sedgwick County. So anyway, a little bit of history as we're in a historical museum, and CASA is in the year of celebrating our 25-year anniversary. But as Janice said, CASA is the acronym for Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children. Now in Spanish, CASA means house or home, but we are not a home decorating or home building service. We provide specially trained volunteers to advocate for the best interests of children who've been abused and or neglected and are under protective custody, and most of them reside in foster care. Many of the kids that we serve have special physical and mental health care needs, and our mission statement is in our brochure, and as Janice mentioned, we do have some stacks of handouts over there on the table, and I encourage you to take a look. We have our formal CASA brochure. I have an About CASA flyer there. Also have a copy of the oath and orders that the judge actually administers to a CASA volunteer when they are sworn in to be an advocate for a child. And you know, we are not a state agency. We are private 501c3, so a big part of my job is fundraising, and so I couldn't resist the opportunity. We have a fundraiser coming up on Sunday. It's a Zumbathon, and it's only a $10 registration at the Bishop Seabury Gymnasium, and you can register at the door or online, but we look at any and every opportunity to raise awareness and raise a few extra dollars, so you've got all of that there. Also, there's a bookmark for the Douglas County Child Abuse Prevention Task Force, and I'll say a few things about that at the end if I have the opportunity, but DCF is also a member of this task force that we have started here in Douglas County to help prevent child abuse and neglect. But back to CASA, when you look at our mission statement, you know, every agency has a formal mission statement, and ours is that we provide comprehensive advocacy for abused and neglected children in need of care and under the protection of the court system. Our trained volunteers investigate, facilitate, monitor, and mentor. Through compassion and commitment, they are dedicated to be the child's voice through their journey to a safe, loving, permanent home. So that's a lot, and when I go out and give these speeches, I found that the easiest way for people to really grasp what that means is to break it down into our mission connector words. And so if you think of it, if you like to cook, think of it as a recipe. If you're math-minded, think of this as an equation, and that is child in crisis plus trained volunteer advocate plus community connections equals safe, loving, permanent home. To break it down even further, child plus volunteer plus community, and that's all of you, equals home. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those components and the children that we serve in the foster care system, but just to give you a good overview, I'd like to play a video that we're actually kind of proud of. This is our first local video. We have some videos from National CASA, but this will allow you to hear from some of our CASA volunteers, and we actually have a few CASA volunteers in the audience today as well, including Janice Friedman, so we're very grateful to all of our wonderful volunteers. And also you'll hear a few words from some of our former CASA youth who spent time in foster care. So cross my fingers, she said, I just pressed this play button. So, and I point it over here.
In the shed when I was a little kid, my parents were drug addicts and I was basically a mom at age 4. On Valentine's Day when I was about 8, people from the state came and took us out of the house without telling us what was going on, and we couldn't take any of our stuff. We sat at the KVC office for a couple hours, and then they took us to Atchison for our first foster care home. They didn't really treat us like family there. They gave us all these rules that was only for foster kids and not for their kids. They would feed us the same dinner every night, but when the state came, they would act different. They would act like we were their family.
My CASA kiddo had been in a home where his mother, who was not married to his father, was a drug user. And she was on drugs when she was pregnant with him.
Both of the girls were meth babies.
He was an adopted child, and he'd had some violent episodes with his father.
They had been removed from the home. They spent 1 week in foster care, and then their aunt agreed to take them. However, it was very stressful for her. She has children of her own. And through this whole process, the day came when the state decided they had to remove them from that home.
Our first little one came home with all kinds of wires and monitoring equipment and was oh so tiny, under 5 pounds big.
Because of the separation from her family, had developed night terrors. And every night she was up screaming, just out of control. She wasn't fully awake, but she was just screaming. And this disrupted the entire family. And so they asked for her to be placed someplace else.
He was in, I believe, somewhere around 13 different placements over that 2.5 years.
Well, I was really young when I was put into the foster care system, so I don't remember a lot, but it was scary.
I think the kids in counties without CASA get lost.
CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocate.
The CASA's job is to focus on the child.
And that's the main, I think, benefit of a CASA is that individual attention to that child or that family that no one else can give them. The court certainly can't give individual attention, nor can the attorneys, the social workers, the therapists, but the CASA is there for that one particular family, and that can make all the difference in the world.
These kids get moved frequently. They have different social workers, sometimes every few months.
Every child needs to have at least one person in his or her corner, and not all kids have that.
Who's gonna be out there and be able to speak for that child? Because that child's scared. They go to court, they see all these adults, they're talking about their lives and they have no input. Who is going to speak for them? And as a CASA volunteer, you're the one that gets to go find out.
By going to different in-services and realizing via statistics or shared stories how many children there are in need. And there are more and more children in need that just come from all sorts of people and all sorts of families. And you just, I don't know, you just seize the day and keep at it.
Well, I thought maybe it would be nice if I had a boy from about 7 to 10 years old, but I ended up with 3 young girls, ages 1, 2, and 4.
As part of my book report, I was able to work with my 10-year-old CASA child to fill out what his wishes were on a worksheet. And we were able to turn that worksheet into the judge so that the judge would know what that child's wishes were.
It was the one thread throughout the entire process that had a consistent message of advocacy for the child.
Well, the instant rewards are the smiles on their faces. The long-term rewards are knowing that you've made a difference in that child's life.
Our kids need heroes. They need somebody to go to bat for them, no matter what anybody else is saying or thinking or recommending, or that's not how we do it, it's not by the books.
There are so many good people out there, and to show a child what a caring adult looks like.
Volunteers are the heart of CASA, and CASA would not exist without the caring individuals who serve as advocates for children. But unfortunately, what we're experiencing right now is such a shortage of CASA volunteers. We need more caring individuals from the community to step up and be a champion for a child.
If I could tell my CASA one thing today, it would be that I love her and I'm grateful for her, and I don't know what I would do without her.
So did you guys see some familiar faces in there? You might have recognized some people from the community. And one thing I want to say too, Heidi, the girl with the long blonde hair who spoke about her time in foster care, she and her sister and her younger brother We're all adopted into a loving family and live in the Topeka area. And Heidi, I believe, is a senior in high school this year, and her goal is to go to K-State and become a veterinarian. And one of the lines in there, Heidi shared some difficulty in one of their foster care placements and how they had the same food every night, and it was fish sticks. She mentioned that. But I also want to point out that there are many wonderful foster homes, and I actually do have a niece here in Lawrence who's a foster home, so I am a foster aunt to 3 children under the age of 5. We are so grateful to the wonderful volunteers who serve as advocates for these children. And when I first started as CASA director 8 years ago, we served 66 children, and we basically had a CASA volunteer for every child that needed one. Flash forward to last year, in 2015, we served 132 children. That's twice the amount of children. And we have a waiting list of more than 40 children who still need a CASA volunteer. So we're always looking for more volunteers. The kids that we serve are in the kind of the last category that Erica was talking about. These are children who have been removed from their homes, and they are in foster care, in a foster care placement, or kinship care, which means that they are placed with a relative. And these are kids who have suffered physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Some of them have been neglected. We see substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental illness as some of the big 3 factors that contribute to the removal from the home. And here in this area, it's surprising to some people, there's been a real increase in the use of meth by parents. So many of the new cases that we get coming in are children who have one or more parent addicted to meth, and we have a lot of young children. In fact, of the 132 children we served this last year, 77 were girls, 55 were boys, and 47 of these kids were age 5 or under. So that's one of the things that we've seen lately, is an increase in that younger age group. Well, as indicated in the video, a lot of times when kids are in foster care, they change foster homes frequently, and there are a variety of reasons for that. But you can imagine how difficult that is, because when they're placed in foster care, their whole world is turned upside down. They're sometimes separated from siblings and from pets and from friends, and if they're school age, they change different schools, and every time they change a placement, their world is turned upside down yet again. And there is a shortage of foster care here in Douglas County, and so we serve children who are placed as far away as Wichita or Parsons or Ark City. That's often very surprising to people. When someone comes to be a CASA volunteer, one of the questions on our application is, how far are you willing to drive? And the reason for that is, at a particular moment in time, they have to find a foster home that is available and also has foster parents trained to meet the needs of those children. And that is a challenge statewide. One of the concerns we have from a CASA perspective is the significant turnover in KVC social workers for the kids. And I'm kind of going out on a limb by saying this, but the situation has been out there on the public radar, and there's a shortage of social workers coming out of college that are willing to take these jobs because it's extremely difficult. We've had children who've had as many as 8 case managers in 1.5 years, 4 case managers in 9 years, 5 case managers in 8 months, and we've had several with as many as 7 case managers in 2 years. So this makes the stability of a CASA volunteer especially important. Sometimes, at some of these case plan meetings, it is the CASA volunteer who best knows that child's history and can, best advocate for that child's needs. When you think about the role of our volunteers, we have about 60 actively assigned volunteers right now, and with our waiting list we need many more. One way to kind of understand the role, I'd like to share a quote from Anna Quindlen, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author. And she says, you go into a courtroom and you'll see lawyers who know the law and have dozens of kids' files. Or you have social workers who know the regulations and also have dozens of kids' files. But if a CASA volunteer is in the room, you will see that they have just one file, and what they know is that one child. And that can make all the difference to a judge's decision regarding how the rest of that child's life is going to go. Our volunteers are advocates for the children, for the child in need of care, not for the parent, the parent in need of care. So our volunteers are assigned to one child or one sibling group, and they focus their time and their advocacy on that. And who are our volunteers? They are teachers, they're counselors, they're retirees, homemakers, law students, social workers. They come from every walk of life. They must go through 30+ hours of training and extensive background checks. Right now, we have a training class starting tonight, and we are one of 10 CASA programs in the nation that was chosen to pilot the new national CASA training curriculum. So we're being guinea pigs here the next few weeks. But our volunteers investigate, facilitate, monitor, mentor, and advocate. So you can kind of think of the big brothers, big sisters relationship where an adult is paired with a child or with siblings. But in the CASA realm, it's taken further than that. In addition to spending time with the child and being a mentor for the child, the CASA does investigative work, and the CASA actually writes a court report and makes recommendations about the child's medical and educational needs and their placement, and monitors whether or not court orders are being followed. So sometimes we are the squeaky wheel. Sometimes the CASA volunteers are discovering services that aren't being delivered. They're discovering needs that the child has that other people may not be aware of. A couple of statistics I like to share are that children with a CASA volunteer are substantially less likely to spend term in long-term foster care, and that's 13.3% for CASA cases versus 27% for those without a CASA. And cases with the CASA are more likely to be permanently closed, and the child is less likely to return to the child welfare system. That's 9% without a CASA versus 16% with a CASA. And when we think of community connections, I mean, really that's caring people like you. We have to raise our entire operating budget, and we get money from the city and the county and the Crime Victims Assistance Fund and from churches and civic groups and many caring individuals. And yes, don't forget the Zumbathon on Sunday. And if you're moving and you're breathing, you're doing Zumba. So, you know, standards are low on that. We have a big fundraiser called Casablanca, but we also have additional funds that we try to help children in foster care. We have a special clothing fund. We have a shoe fund, the Shepherd Shoe Fund, that was founded when Judge Shepherd retired. We have a summer scholarship program, and the Shoe Fund and the summer scholarship program are open to all at-risk kids in the community, not just those served by CASA. And we provide birthday gifts, backpacks and diaper bags, Halloween costumes, adoption gifts, and graduation gifts. You know, there are certain things that are provided by the state through the foster care system, but the amount of money that's allotted really doesn't begin to meet all of these children's needs. So we do try to help and step forward and fill in the cracks, and we're able to do so because of the generosity of people from the community like you. The ultimate goal is to get these children out of foster care and placed in a safe, permanent home. And whether that means reintegration or returning to a parent or adoption or guardianship, or sometimes aging out to independent living as a teenager, these are all things that our agency assists with. And then the task force, I just want to say a quick moment of this as I close here, and that is through the United Way impetus to collaborate with other agencies in the community. I actually reached out to other agencies in our community to work together to make efforts jointly for Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month, which is the month of April. So we do a lot of things together. We plant pinwheels for prevention at City Hall. We're doing this throughout Douglas County now, Lawrence, Eudora, Baldwin, and Lecompton. We have the 5 protective factor bookmarks, and you each have one of those. There were some over there with the handouts. And these are factors that, when are put in place in a community, help reduce the likelihood of child abuse and neglect in a community. And as I mentioned, we have about 50 agencies that are now partners in this initiative. The Lawrence Douglas County Health Department, KBC, and DCF. This is a time when we all come to the table and we do what we can to work together to reduce child abuse and neglect in our community. So those are a few things there. And I just want to close real quickly with a quote that is one of my favorites. And this comes from Pamela Butler, who is a former foster child. And she said, "To give a child a CASA is to give them a voice. To give them a voice is to give them hope. And to give them hope is to give them the world. And that is our goal, is to give these kids hope, to give them the world. And we can do that all by working together. And as Garrison Keillor said, nothing you do for children is ever wasted. Should I stay hooked up, or should I stay hooked up for the questions and answers, or take that off? Okay.
Okay. Who has some questions?